totally, like, it's supposed to be your chair.
It is my pleasure to introduce behind me. This is William Little. Give William a round of applause. William, Mr. Little, comes to us as an expert in the area of 3D printing, certainly an emerging technology and experience, and he is going to share with you today a little bit about 3D printing, the computer software, the actual printing, some of the wonderful things that you can make with a 3D printer. Let's give Mr. Lee a round of applause.
Okay, so rumor has it that some of you guys actually know 3D printing. I heard a couple of people saying, I know that software, and things like that as I have this on the screen. I'm actually going to start it up right now, and as it's doing its thing, I'm going to explain it. It's currently printing a mustache ring for anyone interested. Small thing, but cool. Anyway, so 3D printing can actually, I know that this sounds kind of like a smart way, or silly way, rather, to say this, but it really is 2D printing in another dimension, which is that with 2D printing, standard printers, you have a piece of paper and ink, and you're putting ink on that paper, be it laser or inkjet or what have you, and you have words. Now imagine, instead of you just getting that piece of paper, it continues. It lowers that piece of paper a little bit, and you add more ink on top. And you continue that process, like you lower it a little bit, add more ink, and that's the way that this form of 3D printing works, where it'll put down a completely flat layer, and then it'll move this entire bed down here. I'm actually going to switch over to here so you guys can see a little better. Sorry about it being a little choppy. But you can see here the print bed. This entire glass piece lowers down each layer, and that's what allows it to 3D print. Now what it uses to actually 3D print with instead of ink is plastic, specifically ABS. Now I could say that it's like butadiene, styrene, all this fancy stuff. Better way to put it, it's the same stuff that Legos are made out of. And it's strong stuff, it's great stuff, it has great properties. You can make all sorts of things with it, such as prosthetics and anything from like fun cosplay things and cups and TARDIS things. And there's a cell over here and parts for the printer as well, and I'm going to get to that. But one of the interesting things about ABS plastic is that it's strong, in that if I wanted to, I could take this little sheet here and just let it go wherever. I'm going to actually toss one of these to the crowd, whoever wants to see it. You can pass it around, and that way you can see it. And I'm going to throw another one out. Who else wants it? I don't want to throw it too far just because I don't want to hurt anyone. Good catch. All right, so with that going, and we'll get back to this in a minute. Let's go back to the computer here. It actually works for me. There we go. All right, so normally I would launch straight into the software, but right now I'm going to launch first into the community side of 3D printing. 3D printing largely is open source and is fueled by the people who actually run the 3D printers. It's not like a company thing where big business runs it and this and that. It's a lot of open source things where, for instance, there's the company RepRap, where you can have a friend who already has a 3D printer 3D print the parts for your printer. So it's kind of like the whole replication Terminator type thing. It's a very interesting thing that you're going to do. But it's not only open source 3D printing, but it's open source models. These printers would be nothing without these 3D models. For instance, this mustache ring that I printed, or am printing in this program. This is a 3D model right here of that mustache ring that I currently have here. Now, the interesting thing about that is that there are a lot of places where you can get these models. A very popular place that I would like to cover here is Thingiverse. And this is actually where I got the mustache ring. And what you can do is there's a library of hundreds of thousands of different models that are completely free to download and print with your printer. And if you remember the old pirating commercials, like you wouldn't download a car, you wouldn't download a pizza, like because they were talking about the whole theft and piracy thing. You can actually download cars and pizza on here, and you can print them. And some people have actually printed full-sized cars, and I'll get to that a little later. Now, this is great because you can get all manner of things. You've probably heard about the Apple Watch. They have a category just for that, so you can have fun with that and look at all the Apple Watch stuff. And this is all stuff that you can print with a standard 3D printer. You can choose, you can pick. Some of them have customizers, so you can make them pretty, have your name on them, so on and so forth. But maybe that isn't quite enough. And that's where some software comes in. Now, a lot of people may have heard of AutoCAD, just because that's used a lot in like architecture and really fancy stuff, and it's like a $10,000 program. Something that I prefer to use, which is currently opening now, is made by the same people who create that program, AutoCAD, but instead it's their free iteration that's called 123D Design. And what that allows you to do is very easily create 3D models on whatever computer you have. You don't have to have the supercomputers with the amazing video cards and such that most companies have for their fancy 3D modeling program. It's simple and easy. And there have been many things that have been made in that program. For instance, this lovely phone dock that I currently have here. And actually, I'm going to switch over to here. Can I get the camera going? Hey, camera. If I were not in the shot. Anyway. Yeah, something like that. There we go. So this is currently holding my little iPhone 6 here. And it's simple and 3D printed and cool, and it was made in this program that I'm procrastinating as it tries to open. But there are also many other things that have been made here in that program. You can have moving parts that you can actually 3D model, and they'll print in a single piece. This little guy here that I'll actually toss around. Who wants it? Oh, so close. Sorry. It's lightweight at least, but that has moving parts, and it came right off the print bed using this program. Let's see, what is that? It would help if computers actually worked. But I'll get to that once that gets going again. So while that's loading, I shall instead talk about some more community things. Another thing, and I actually have something on the resources paper that I'll be passing around later. There's a forum that is great for when you're just starting out with 3D printing, because there are no manuals that really come with 3D printing. You don't get like a nice, here's how you 3D print manual with your printer. Some of them try to, but it doesn't work out. So let's just see here. I get to memorize it myself. But let's see, 3D print board. Now this website allows you to, again if it loads, silly computers, but 3D print board is where thousands of people in the 3D printing community come together to talk about different things on 3D printing, like, oh, my printer is doing this funky thing, oh, it's not working, I want to use this plastic, has anyone tried it out? And all these different questions, or just, I'm new to 3D printing, what do you recommend as a printer, what do you recommend as this and that, blah, 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 and it really helps you get started. So if anyone's actually interested in 3D printing, then I highly recommend that. I know I'm going rather fast just because I'm trying to fit a lot into a very small amount of time. I'm used to having 2 hours to do this. So I know that I'm moving fast. Are there any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Yes?
It's not what you've talked about, but why is your iPad or whatever that is connected to the printer?
Normally I would use this as a presentation piece. I had it set up hoping that I could, but I actually forgot a cable. Normally, and some of you may have actually heard about this computer. Let's see if I can grab it. There we go. Totally meant to do that. This is a Raspberry Pi. And some of you have probably heard about it. It's a $35 computer you can plug a mouse and keyboard into and connect to Wi-Fi and have it connected to a screen and this and that. Oh, just finished another ring. And it's a small computer that I normally mount onto the back of my printer. It allows me to control the printer over a web browser versus having some fancy programs such as Repetier here. If it actually selects. Okay, so this program, Repetier, is a very complex program, and it's okay to work with. It's just not perfect, and it's not all that user-friendly, which is why I prefer sometimes to go to the server version where you really just go to your web browser, put in an address, and it goes to this computer, and it controls everything for you, which I think is great. But that's why I had this here as a very long answer. Are there any other questions? Yes?
How long does it take for the thing you print out to pull down so you can use it?
That's actually an excellent question. Now, the extruder itself runs at around anywhere between 240 and 270 Celsius. And if anybody knows their Celsius to Fahrenheit, that's really hot. The bed itself, however, just runs at around boiling point, which means that this print that I just made, I can actually touch and wear, and who wants it? Now, I'm going to need the other 3D prints I'm going to need back, but this one is for keeps.
I don't have facial hair.
Anyway. Got a question back there, yes? Look like this, not necessarily. I just cut power to it. Oh, no, it's fine. Never mind, looked like it was having issues. But not all of them do. There are different types of 3D printers. This is what we call a Cartesian style, in that it runs on kind of an H shape, where this whole gantry can move forward and back, left and right. And that's what allows it to print. There's also the Delta style that works in kind of a triangle, where you have 3 points that lift and move the extruder to allow it to print. There are also a bunch of others that are very custom and unique and different technologies altogether. So this is kind of a standard boxy style, but there are many other unique styles.
Is there like a limit to how big you can make something?
Make a printer?
Like, no, how big you can make something in the printer.
Oh, yes, actually. It's only limited by how far the extruder and the bed can move. In this case, it can move within an 8-inch cube, because I have an 8-inch bed here, and it can go about 8 inches down. You can make a larger printer. People have made printers that are large enough to print large cars in a single piece. And that's always very interesting, because they're surprisingly affordable and nice. Yes?
How much would something like that cost?
What, one of the giant printers?
Like that?
Oh, one of these?
Yeah.
That's actually an excellent point, and it goes to some of my hardware stuff that I'm going to be covering. This printer, when I first got it, was around 800. Now, I made a lot of different modifications to improve it and increase performance and quality and this and that, but base model was 800. Now, it's a bit of a messy printer. There are some nicer printers that are a couple thousand, and if you wanted to go for some of the nicest ones on the market, or if you really, really, really wanted to get into the 3D printing industry, there are the EOS printers, which instead of extruding stuff, it has powder that it hits with a laser. And when most people think of a laser, they think of a laser pen. When I think of a laser, I think of this guy. This is a laser. It's used for stuff like 3D printing with the method called selective laser sintering. And what that does is you lay down a thing of powder. This hits that powder in the pattern of your 3D model. It adds a little bit more powder and repeats. And that's how it does that process. And one of those units is about 1.4 million. So if you want to really invest in 3D printing, then you can. But some of the better hardware that I'm actually going to be recommending, a lot of people have probably heard about MakerBot because they're a very large 3D printing brand. Personally, they are good printers, don't get me wrong, but I find them to be dealer queens in the sense that they break down very frequently and they have some not so easy to repair parts. So you end up just shipping it out all the time to be repaired, which is just a pain. It's not great. Is this program going to open for me? Apparently not. Yay. Gotta love failures. All right. Well, I can't cover that part of the program, but, oh, do you see one more question?
That white wheel plastic, how much, how big could you make something with that amount?
Well, that's an interesting question. And tell you what, I will go into that because that goes into more of the specifics on 3D printing. In 3D printing, you're able to choose how much plastic goes inside of the print. And I'm actually going to switch back over to the video because this is very small to see. So this print here, helps if I'm not in the screen. Is it going to work for me? Yeah, there we go. Now this is a singing serpent model. Did it freeze up on me? Yeah, I think it froze up on me. Computers! Oh, well, now it's just out of frame. Thanks. But anyway, if this actually stops freezing, don't move it, then you'll see that it has a infill of sorts that's made of almost a honeycomb. Tell you what, actually, this is a bit of a frail model. Don't be too afraid if it breaks. Just don't actively try to break it. But this shows you the inside of a 3D print and how it's not solid, but you can actually choose how thick or how much material you have inside. Slightly heavier. Really don't want to throw it. All right. So that has a honeycomb kind of infill, which makes it very light and doesn't use so much plastic. So when somebody says how much plastic did it take to make this or how much plastic will it take to make this, it's really a variable. And you can make a lot more with a single spool of filament if you actually budget out that spool of filament and make it last and work with your models accordingly. Yes? The spools?
Yeah.
I get mine from a kind of it's kind of a pro series of plastic. Normally you can get it for anywhere between $15 to $25 if you're willing to work with not so great plastic. I like to work with the pro series, and so each spool costs about 45 to 75. You can also, if you're getting fancier stuff, you can go into the hundreds and so on. And yeah, it can get expensive, but if you shop like in the right places, then you'll find great plastic for not too much of an expensive price. It's not a fixed price, so if you look in the right places, you can find something cheap. Are there any questions?
So like how long of a piece of plastic do you use to make the ring?
The ring uses very little. It can actually tell you in software. This is one of the specifics. I was hoping to maybe not go over this. It is a very specific piece of the software side. But the interesting thing about the 3D printing program is it can tell you how much plastic you're using by, there we go. It actually tells you a specific 465 millimeters, because when it generates the code from the 3D model, then it will be able to know exactly how much 3D printing filament that you will use. There are actually calculators out there that tell you like how much of this you can make on a single spool of plastic and how much it would cost and this and that, which is really cool. So, any other questions before I continue? Yes.
If people make cars, can they make like limbs or something for the handicap?
That is actually very interesting to bring up. Prosthetics is a rather big thing that's coming up with 3D printing. And I'm actually part of a community called eNable. And what they do is they have a community of volunteer 3D printers, 3D modelers, and so on and so forth, who will use their 3D printer or use their skills with a 3D modeling program and make custom prosthetics for somebody in need, be them arms, legs, so on and so forth. And you can actually have motors and sensors in them for them to actually work as proper limbs. They're not just like puppet string type deals. And so you can 3D print prosthetics off of, a printer like this. And that is opening up a huge market and is causing a major rustle in the prosthetics world. Since normally they do custom injection mold things that are like $30,000, and now you can do them for less than $100. Last question. Yes? Printing weapons. That's actually a very, very interesting part. There is actually some controversy in that, and this may actually cause some 3D printing regulations, although I doubt that they'll actually work in my personal opinion, where you can actually go online and with the addition of like a special pin that you can get on eBay that is like non-tracked or anything like that, you can actually print yourself a functioning firearm, which is rather a scary idea for some people. And it's a scary idea for whoever is printing it because while this plastic is strong, it's not strong enough to handle those pressures. So it tends to be more fatal for the person trying to use it and being silly than for the person who actually has it aimed at them. So don't do that, ever. Though this is great. I'm going to continue apparently the internet is having issues, so I'm going to continue the community side and internet side later on, which is a bit of a bummer because I was hoping to talk about how some people think of it as like a post-scarcity economy where if we only need plastic, then what will that do to our economy and things like that. But I'll get to that after lunchtime. How much time do we have?
You have till 12:30, and then you have after lunch again.
Okay, great.
So 15 minutes.
All right. So just because I have a small amount of time, I'm going to show the process of 3D, like going from a model that I downloaded all the way up to the 3D printing process. And for that, I'm going to see if another program will open for me, which hopefully it will. Please open. Is it going to do anything for me? Hey! Okay. So this program that I'm opening right now is also on this resource list that I'll be handing out later. And what this is it allows you to prepare things such as 3D models and 3D scans. And I'm going to get into 3D scans after lunch. So this program that I'm opening here will allow us to take a look at our model that we're going to print and make sure that it's all as it should be. And so let's see if this will actually do its thing for me. I do apologize, normally this works. It's always in presentations that it has issues. Why? I don't know. All right, to keep everyone from waiting, I'm going to skip that part. Maybe I'll cover that after lunch once everything is fixed up. So let's say you want to print a part. First you start in this program. This is a free program called Repetier Host. Some people like to call it Repeater. It's like a French thing, and so it's a debatable name. But Repetier, and let's say I want to add an object to print. And I've downloaded this object. And let's say I want to print the abstract cup that I have here. And it'll import the cup, and it says a STL file. That's the file format most commonly used for 3D models. And let's see. As it loads for me, this poor little laptop just screaming here. What's up? It's almost done. Eventually. Well, it's loading, yes.
How much would it cost? I know you said that cost close to $80
Yes.
when you first bought it. How much would that cost if somebody else 3D printed it for you and let's say sold it on an eBay or Craigslist or Amazon?
That's something that's been happening a fair bit, actually. People have been making rep parts and other replacement parts for people who either want a 3D printer or had their 3D printer die and they have no other means of repairing it. And I've actually been in that place a few times, and fortunately I have a friend that has a 3D printer that's helped me out. Since a lot of these parts here, like the blue, the white, and the red on this printer, were printed either by itself or by another printer to upgrade itself, which is kind of cool when you think about it. Hey, it loaded. But that actually does reduce cost. It means that you have to make it yourself and buy some of the parts that cannot be 3D printed. You, of course, cannot yet 3D print electronics, but you can 3D print anything structural on this printer. So even now, like this printer, the industry is moving so fast that now this is more than half off. You can get it for like $350 now, which is great because printers are coming down in cost. You can get one for $350, $250, and prices along those lines that will allow you to get into 3D printing without breaking the bank. So here I am in this program. I've got the abstract cup here ready to print. Now, something that's not commonly covered in 3D printing is that you have to slice it, or at least that's what it's called. Because right now what you have is just polygons, and there's no lines of code for it to go layer by layer. And so you have to prepare it for printing by going into the slicer program. And what it does is it takes this model and it turns it into the individual layers that it prints, so that then it knows where to move the motors and when to move the bed and how much to extrude. So I could go ahead and slice it here. You can have multiple options here as far as how strong you want it to be, how precise you want it to be, and things along those lines. And if anyone happens to be holding on to any of those 3D prints, feel free to pass them along. I'm hoping to have as many people as possible have a look at them. Yes?
Can you change colors?
You can change colors, however, not...
midstream, like make it multiple colors.
Unfortunately, that requires a special extruder. That is available. It's not something that I can do on this current printer, but you can. The filament does come in multiple colors. We have glow-in-the-dark, we have white, black, blue, and somewhere around here we have red. Oh, yes, right there. And so if you just want to have a single colored thing, you can do that. The other option is that ABS plastic is fully able to be painted just with standard paints. And so you could make something such as this little pin here that I'll pass around. I work for a radio station called WNTI. And I made a couple of pins. And that was a pin that I very roughly painted. I'm not a painter. So that's still slicing. But you can actually paint it and work with it and sand it and do whatever you like to make it whatever you want. Yes.
So if printing a weapon with lower grades of plastic, then would probably choose totally versus like fire. Would you just make restrictions on the higher grades of plastic?
Yes, but that would still impact to 3D print because personally I like to work with some of the higher end plastics. There's a filament spool that's polycarbonate, which is some of the hardest plastics that you can actually print in right now, and that allows you to make seriously sturdy parts. It's the filament of choice for making things like that. Again, don't do this. I'm accidentally giving tips on this. Please don't do this. I will not tell you where the files are or how to print it or anything because no, bad. But I don't know why this is taking so long to slice. But yeah, having restrictions on higher grades of plastic probably wouldn't be the best way of handling that. What would be the best way of handling that is probably model control, so that you have regulations on 3D models that are online and available to certain people. And I think that might be the most likely thing that happens. But in the grand scheme of things, that's really not likely. Were there any other questions while I'm waiting for this to twiddle its thumbs? Either or. I can continue if you have more questions.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you think the malleability of the plastic after, like, if someone wanted to make clothes? Or,
After lunch, there's a very interesting video I'm actually going to be showing on clothes intellects, but you can also print things that are hard, and in the softening process through the extruder, it will soften up and become more palatable. It is compatible with this printer, but whatever printer you get has to be compatible with, or rather it has to be able to achieve certain temperatures. They'll put a temperature range on the item that the plastic is extruded from. And so you have to be able to print within those parameters. I actually installed a third-party extruder on this one so I could get to really high temperatures, up to 350 Celsius, so that I can print just about anything. Yes?
Is the Raspberry Pi related to the Google Glass?
It's not related. They're almost, I don't want to call them competitors, but they both do a very similar job. And I've been wanting to play with Eagle Bone Black, another similar version to this computer here, just a little bit more expensive, to work as a project PC. And they can both work as a server to assist you in your 3D printing endeavors. Are there any other questions? That is also a good point. While I'm slicing this, it actually finished slicing, but if you look at the slicer settings that I have here, if I pull this down, you can see a bunch of little numbers here. You can see like 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, 4. And what that is it defines how, or what the layer setting is set for. Normally, the highest quality that this can go for is 100 microns, which is 0.1 millimeter, very, very thin. Normally, for things that I want to print quickly, like this, little mustache ring, or some of the other stuff that you see over there, I tend to print at 0.3 millimeters, and that allows it to run just a bit faster because it's not making as many layers. And so you can vary that as much as you like. You can have it be like really thick, really thin for each layer, and that allows you to increase or decrease the precision and quality of the print. So now that it's sliced, it's ready to go. Now it's just code, and I could go through this giant thing of code because it just, for 440,771 lines of code it just generated to go from a bunch of polygons into this cup. And I could actually scroll through them and you could see a bunch of random garble as it just tells it what to do. And it's just telling it, like, move the x-axis, move the y-axis, and extrude this much. That's basically all it's doing over and over and over and over. And then normally I would print this. It's ready to print, it's ready to go. I could hit start print. I've got everything up to temperature, but just like a baking show, I already have it already here. Lovely cup, already printed. And you can just see it as a nice comparison here. Just a nice little cup there. Now the nice thing about this is that I made it solid enough where I could actually make it watertight, and so I did. Thumbs up. There we go. And if you want to find your cup at night, I did actually print this in glow-in-the-dark filament. Yes.
Is there a layer filament?
What's that?
Is there clear filament?
With certain transparencies, you won't get perfectly clear, but you will get transparency so that you could at least see somewhat through it. As as you'll see on some of the 3D prints that have been passed around, you'll see that it has imperfections, just like where the bed shook around a little bit, the extruder had very minor issues. It's just a problem with the way that the printer technology as a whole is, because it has these layers. Instead of continuous printing or injection molding, it's made in layers, and that causes it to be a little smudged as you try to look through something transparent. Any other questions? Yes?
Can you make anything else like out of any of these out of plastic, or is there like other materials?
You can use other materials, and actually I will pass this around, however, I ask you to be careful, just because it's not the greatest thing as far as structure. This is actually a bookmark that I made, except instead of making it out of plastic, it has a small amount of plastic you glue it together. Excuse me, but other than that, it's wood particulate. So I basically printed in wood there. And you can actually sand it and stain it and do whatever you like, just as you would something made out of wood. There are also some other things coming out. You can print in carbon fiber, you can print in copper and iron and things like that. It all depends on your extruder. It's mixed with plastic, so it can still be melted and pushed through an extruder, because if you just shove metal into it, you would not be happy. But having a little bit of plastic mixed in allows it to work as a glue of sorts that permits it to be extruded from such a standard printer. Yes?
Can you find things like Raspberry Pi with
The Raspberry Pi itself, unfortunately not, because we're not at that point where we can print circuitry and electronics. People are working on it where they put very basic, just extruding lines of metal to work as wire in their prints, and they can actually have integrated wiring. They're not quite at circuitry, but they can have integrated wiring in their pieces. Yes?
Is it possible to print with glass yet?
Not quite yet, but I bet that we'll get there at some point. I bet that if you were to blast sand in a selective laser sintering printer with one of these guys, you could probably turn it into some form of glass, although it probably wouldn't be the most clear thing inside.
Yeah, for the, when you had the wood particles, was that on a spool?
It
that
was.
You bought? So it came free
Yes.
with the amount of wood to buy this.
And that's something that takes a bit of doing on the creation side. They have to have plastic and wood mixed just right. And there are some parts where they don't get it, and that's when you have the blow torch and this and that. But yes, it does come rather brittle. And some of you guys haven't answered yet. Yes?
Can you print like functional body parts?
Functional body parts? There are, well, this won't print it. There are some very special. One of the reasons why I don't cover it is because it's so closed source, and there really isn't much in the way of published paperwork on it. But there are 3D printers out there that can print on a cellular level that can then allow for functioning organs to be printed. Now this is very new, and again, there isn't much published on it, so all I can really say is it's cool and it's happening. And so hopefully we'll have 3D printed livers and such in the near future. Anybody else? Yes?
Maybe it's a possibility that you could print
Food. NASA's working on that. They're working on printing pizza and other things so that you can actually print food in space. And so that you could just send the raw materials in boxes and bags that are fed into a printer to create food. And on a simpler level, I'll finish up in just a minute, I know it's almost lunchtime. But on a simpler level, you can actually print with sugar and chocolate using different extruders. I've been working personally, they have the models available for you to create your own chocolate extruder, and so I'm going to hopefully do that. But you melt down the chocolate and you heat it in a heated reservoir. They have it made so that you can basically put a hair dryer into the reservoir and it keeps the chocolate hot, and then it extrudes it using a worm gear so that you can actually 3D print anything out of chocolate, which just sounds so wonderful. Yes?
How does it set? Because if it extrudes straight into that, so it's making their things it set and not sort of smeared away.
What?
How does it set that quick?
Instead of having a heated bed, you have a chilled bed. So that then you have a cooling element on the print bed so that then it cools down very rapidly. Anybody else?
So, if your, whatever you're printing has more than a material, you have to switch to spool.
You can do that, however that's a little bit risky to do. What most people do is they make multiple extruder printers. Her question was, when you change materials, do you just have to do it manually, or is there something that you can do about that? You can actually get printers that have more than one of these modules up here, so that you can have multiple materials fed into the printer at once, allowing you to feed multiple colors, multiple materials. The most popular thing for that, due to the fact that you're going layer by layer, if you suddenly have something that prints in the middle of air, that's just going to sag and melt and it's not going to look great. It's a lot like this. This is a failure of mine where it popped off the print bed. And you can see all these little stringy bits are bits that were not supported. They didn't have any kind of support because they were hanging in empty space as they were printed. And this is a dead version of that lamp there, by the way. Yeah, this was probably the prettiest failure I've ever had. Failures do happen. I'll get to that after lunch. But due to that, if you have support material, then you're able to fix that problem because it'll print supports for anything that prints in empty space. And the most popular thing to do with multiple extruders is you feed in a filament that's water soluble. So that all you have to do is toss it in a tub of water and it will dissolve the support material, leaving you just with your print. Yes?
Are you allowed to like make weapons
We did cover that a little bit. Weapons are possible.
Can't hear the answer.
The whole thing with firearms and weaponry in general is the reason why a lot of people are wondering if regulations are going to start being put in place on 3D printing. And so that might, currently, yes, that is a thing. But it is not a good thing. I'm not going to tell anyone where any of those files are, or what they are, or how to print them, because they are complex to print, and so I'm not going to cover them at all because they are terrible. And no, don't do that, they will blow up in your face. Yes?
Isn't there like a pen that like prints things like in the air?
Yes, but that's only done with your hand. Instead of having stepper motors like this that move the nozzle around, you're only using your hand. So it's a very imprecise system. There's no computer or models involved. It's basically a hot glue gun with plastic. So it is cool, and it does allow you to 3D print, but only with your own hand. You're not able to do really intricate or structural things. Yes?
You make something like heavier, like you're making a bowling ball or something?
That's coming, and some of the larger printers can do that. However, a lot of people believe that to be a waste of materials since the filament is very expensive. What some people have done, because people have made things like roller blades and strong stuff, that they then fill in with something like concrete or sand or water, and that gives them the weight or mass that they need. Anybody else? Yes?
Like when you mentioned the way the laser does it, is it faster that way than the
Strangely not, only because it has to be very slow due to the powder. The powder and also the heat factor, because the whole thing has to be heated up to a very high temperature, almost melting point for the plastic. And then the laser hits it, and it has to very slowly smooth powder down. Now, it has to be extremely slow and precise, else it will disturb the part and it'll have issues. So strangely enough, in most cases, these printers are less precise and cannot do as much, but are much faster than the laser-based printers. There's also another technology called clip that I believe is the future of 3D printing, and I'll cover that after lunch. There's a great TED talk on it. Some people have probably seen it around on Facebook and such. But on that note, I believe it's 12:30.